Hello, good evening everyone. Welcome you all to the webinar on Code to Cloud with Ballerina. Today we have Sameera Jayasooma, Head of Architecture for Ballerina at WSO2. He is here to share his knowledge with all of us. Sameera, screen is yours.
All right. Thank you, Charit. Thank you, Chirag. And thank you, Kanchan and the team for the opportunity to talk about Ballerina Lang. Yes, today's topic is code to cloud Ballerina. So I'll be mostly spending writing some code and deploying that into cloud in various channels. So before we start, let me share my screen. Okay. Can you all see my screen? Not yet? Okay. Let me see what I can do here. So this is, give me a second. Sorry, I had to restart my browser. Okay, let me get started. How about now?
Yeah.
All right. All right. Sorry about the delay. Quick tech glitch. Okay. So, so good evening, and I think I should say good morning and good afternoon. So this is broadcast live via YouTube and other channels. So who knows, there may be viewers from other parts of the world. So before we get started, let me give a quick introduction to myself, what I do at WSO2. I'm Sameera Jayasooma. I work for WSO2, and I think this is my 14th year in the company. I still remember I joined WSO2 like 2008 as a fresh graduate from University of Margaret CS department. And I also did my internship at WSO2. That's interesting. So now I'm basically based in Seattle. It's pretty early here, 6:30. Yeah, 6:35. I'm not usually an early bird, so I'm still waking up. Sorry about the delay. And in the Ballerina team, I'm a member of the engineering team, and I also work as the platform architect. Right, so that's what I do at WSO2. Okay, so today's topic is code to cloud with Ballerina. So as I said earlier, let's develop some code and let's try to deploy that in production, and we can see how Ballerina make it easy to do that. So that's the topic of the day. I do have few slides, not a lot. I'll be mostly spending in VS Code and basically terminal. All right. So I thought of giving a quick overview of the session today. so that you know what's coming. Right. So first, let's develop a Ballerina function, and I'll talk about the details in the next slide, what it's going to look like. So we'll be connecting to different external services and build something useful out of that. And then let's deploy that function as a Lambda function in AWS. Let's see how it goes. And then we can transform or convert the Ballerina function that we have developed into a RESTful API. And in that, I'm trying to show you how you can write services and resources using Ballerina. Then we can deploy that into Docker and Kubernetes. Sounds good? Okay. The next slide. So this is the use case that I'm trying to build today. Right. So this is the mental model. It's a sequence diagram that shows the various connections to external systems, etc. So the idea is, let's build a function that will give you the top 10 countries with the highest COVID case fatality ratio. I did a similar topic a few weeks ago in Cloud Native London meetup, but the format here today, it's going to be a little bit different. It's not the same. I'll be starting with the function, and then my focus is mostly on deploying code to cloud. Okay, so this function will give you the top 10 countries with high CFR. I'll use the term CFR here. To do that, I need to communicate with two backends. The COVID data endpoint, this is, I think, disease SH. So it will give you latest statistics, COVID statistics of a country, right? And then from those statistics, we can generate the case failure ratio. That's an important number. Where if you have the total number of deaths, total number of cases, then you can calculate this as a ratio, as a percentage, right? Then for each country, we can get more information from the World Bank API, like the region of that country, income level of that country, etc. So by default, the World Bank respond with an XML response, but you can get JSON if you specify the format at JSON. But for this demo, I'll use XML. The COVID data endpoint will give you JSON. So we'll see how you can work with JSON and XML payloads in the language, as well as how do you do network interactions to two backends and do some calculations and then send the response, right? So, so this is one scenario. The other scenario is when you pass a country code, that's one country. This is top 10 or top 9, top 5 countries. The other one is when you pass a single country, I should do the same and return response. So I'll start with that, right? So that's going to be the use case that I'm working on today. Okay, I'll right away jump to the VS Code. I'm using VS Code with Ballerina extension installed. You can do so via the extensions tab, right? This is the latest version, and I'm also using the latest version of the language. I'll just show you the Bal version. It's the latest version, the second patch version of Swan Lake. So we recently did Ballerina Swan Lake. That's a major release with major feature additions to the language. We did it in like first or end of January this year. So if you haven't tried it out, please do so. So I'll be using that version today. And also I have already created a Ballerina project. I use the bar, right? So I'm in that directory. If I do ls, you can see the files that are there, Ballerina toml file and main file. Ballerina toml basically indicate this directory as a Ballerina project. main bal file is the default file that is generated. So bal is the extension that we use for Ballerina source files. So if you want to create your own package, you can do so via bal new command by giving a name. Let me increase the font size. Okay. All right. Clear that up. Okay. So this is the main function, pretty standard hello world. I'm not going to run it today. Let me delete this. I'll start with the function that we want to build today. So let's say function get COVID CFR. Let's take the country code as input. Now I'll just complete like this. So the Ballerina language syntax is pretty similar to C-style languages. We wanted to maintain familiarity with other languages. So if you're already familiar with a C-style language, it's pretty easy to get started with Ballerina, right? So this function takes the parameter country code, and let's define the return. So we can return a record here. Let's name it as country. I'm yet to define it. So it says cannot find, I think. So let's go ahead and define the country. So I'm going to define a country type called record type called country. So the fields, let's see. Let me look at my notes. Yeah, so fields, we can have a field called code, country code, basically LK, US, like that. It could be 3-letter or 2-letter country code. That should be fine. Then the name of the country, I would say population. Then we can put the region, income level, and then let's use case fatality ratio. Right? All right. This is going to be the definition of the country, and this function, when you pass a code, it should give you these details. So that's the idea. Now, if I go back to the sequence diagram, first we need to talk to the COVID data endpoint, right? So let's do that. So in Ballerina, we have a concept called clients to communicate with backend systems. You have a client, and the clients, they have remote functions. Like in the case of HTTP client, the remote functions can be get, put, post, delete. That makes sense. So let me define the HTTP. When I do this, it will import the HTTP package. So as I said earlier, Ballerina is designed for writing services and consuming services, combining services. That's the main use case. And Ballerina should provide, you will see soon. So Ballerina provide a better experience when it comes to providing services, writing services of any protocol. So here, as you can see, HTTP, we'll talk about the later, gRPC, GraphQL, and other protocols are part of the standard library, right, of the language. So here you can use HTTP client. Let's name it as COVID data. I'll name it up. Let me just get the URL from my notes. All right. This is the endpoint URL. Now here, this can gives you an error. So what happens here is, if this creating a new client is successful, you get the HTTP client object back. If not, it will give you an error. We represent that as a union type in the language. So you have HTTP client or error situation. So now I need to filter out error from the client, so that I need to do a GET request. So one way to do that would be using type test. Like I can check COVID data is error. If it's an error, then I'll work with the error. So as you can see, inside this block, COVID data, the type of COVID data is now error. I can get the course, message, track trace, etc. Right? And then the else block. Now the COVID data is an HTTP client in this block. So this type test combined with if else, I can work with these two types, right? But most of the time, I don't need to handle the error then and there. I can pass the error back to the caller, right? Back to the caller who is calling this function, right? So let me delete this for now. And I can indicate that this function returns an error as well if something goes wrong. If everything worked well, you get a country. Otherwise, you get an error. So here we have an expression called keyword called check here. When I put check, the semantics of check is if this expression is successfully completed, you'll get the client. If it fails, then the check will return that error from the function. So it won't go to the next line, right? So in this case, I don't need this error here. You get this yellow squiggly line because of unused variable. That's fine for now. Now I can use the COVID data endpoint to do a get, right? So I'll show that a little later. So we can do a string template here. I think it's countries, resource path. And I can use variable here. Here's a string template. And then this is a path, the resource path of this endpoint, right? Let me do a curl and show you the result here. Countries, let's say LK, and let's use this command to format the response for us. All right, so this is the response I got from the DCSH or COVID data endpoint. It has cases, maybe deaths. Yeah, it has cases and deaths. And then country code, country name, population. So I have all the information I need, but there are additional details that I don't need. Let's see. All right. Now, this is a JSON. So I can say JSON COVID data payload equals. So this is a network call, and this can fail. Right? So I use check, and check will return the error from the function. So I get the nice JSON payload to work with. So if you notice, we have a different syntax here, arrow. I have heard for some people it's a little bit confusing because usually if it's a class, you usually use dot, right, to invoke methods of a class. So HTTP client, the client is actually a class in Ballerina, but I can. Yeah, so it's a class. Ballerina has classes as well. We don't call Ballerina as object-oriented language, but does has classes because you need them for certain use cases. So HTTP client is a class, and also it has this. It is a client class, and client classes can have. Let me show you remote functions. In Ballerina normal classes, they cannot have remote functions, but client classes can have remote functions. Remote functions represent remote calls to other services. So if it's a remote function, we have to use the arrow syntax. And if it's a normal regular method in a class, you can use the dot operation. You can use dot. I'll tell you why this difference, why you need to use arrow versus dot later. Okay, now I have a nice JSON payload. So you can actually work with JSON in Ballerina. I can say what I need is deaths or cases. I can take cases. Cases is probably integer, I guess. So I can do int cases. That'll work. I should use check. Yeah, that's okay. But every time I try to access something from JSON, I have to deal with errors because the JSON is dynamic and we don't know whether this cases field will be there or not. So when you work with JSON in Ballerina, it's usually you get the result or the error. So it's not safe anyway. Then it is safe because we don't throw runtime errors like other languages. It's still compile time, it's guaranteed. So when you go to the next line, it's guaranteed you have a case. Otherwise, this function will return. But if you want to access several fields here, it can get pretty messy with JSON. So our recommendation is to use an application-defined record type. You can simply map this JSON into another record type and use the record type to access data. So let me copy this JSON. I don't need to write everything. Let me use this. Sorry about that. I'm using this payload. I copy it to my clipboard. And so Ballerina vSphere plugin comes with this little useful utility where it will create a record type from a JSON, right? So you have paste JSON as record. It's in my clipboard. It created a record with all the fields, right? But I don't need all these fields. I just need a few fields like country name. Let me delete everything else. I need cases. I need population. I probably need country info. That's here. And deaths. That's probably it. In the country info, I don't need all these details. Mostly the country code. Now, while I was working on this demo, I've noticed that sometimes this field is not there for certain countries, right? So I would have to specify that in the record type. If the field is not there, you'll get errors. So if I make it field optional, the value of the field optional, so most of the cases you get a string value, otherwise it will be nil. So you can represent that as like this in Ballerina. So this is optional type. You can also, it is same as nil. Right? So this is nil Ballerina. So again, this is the union. The syntactic sugar would be something like this. Okay, so now I have the record. Let's name it as COVID country. I have the COVID country. So the COVID country represent the output or the return from the COVID data endpoint. All right. Let me delete this. Now, earlier I was using JSON. Now I'm directly using record type. So as you can see, JSON to record conversion is pretty seamless in Ballerina. And most of these clients, they do that automatically. So earlier I was using JSON, now record. I didn't have to marshal or unmarshal JSON to record. It works directly. So that's one of the advantages of Ballerina. It has a nice JSON to record feature. And all these things are enabled by the design of the type system. I guess that will be another talk, so I'll stop there. Another thing that I want to highlight here is, so we have two styles of records here. As you can see, the syntax, I have used piped and no other field. So this is we called a closed record in the language, and this is called open record. The difference is, in a closed record, you can specify only these fields, right? So the values of the fields definitely have to be string and int decimal. But if you're defining this record, you cannot have additional field, or you cannot have less fields or more fields. You have to exactly the 6 fields. That's a closed record. Open record, on the other hand, you have to have these fields, right? These are mandatory features, mandatory fields. But in addition to these, you can have more. Now, if you remember this payload, now the COVID data endpoint gives you a lot more fields than what I have specified here. So the way it works is, when I do this get, it will send me this JSON. JSON is mapped to COVID country, and an instance of the COVID country contain all these fields, but I have defined only these. So it can contain more, so that's okay. So that's a nice way to work with, because if I had to specify all these fields here, it's also I don't know to do that in this case. Okay, now the next step is to calculate the case fatality ratio. Let's define a variable. Ratio. You can have a quick little function to do that. Let's say I have a variable called deaths cases. I may define these variables and also the function. So I'll do function CFR here. Let's say integer deaths in cases, and this function returns a decimal. This is a very small, maybe perhaps one expression function. So I'll use expression body function in Ballerina here. I could do death over cases 100. So that will do. But okay, so the return type is decimal, but deaths and cases are integers. In Ballerina, we don't do automatic numeric conversions. You would have to cast. Right. So decimal. So I'm going to cast integer to decimal here. That will do. I can simply use the CD payload record here to get to deaths like this. That will be okay. But in the next few lines, I have to use other fields like population, other things. So I think I don't have to. One way is I don't have to type CD payload every time. So you can destructure the record. Let's say something like this: record variable into different variables. Here I can say using this format. Here the country is the field name, right? Here the country is the field name, this one, and this is the variable name that I want to use within the function. Similarly, I could do cases is the field name, and cases is the variable or name also. Then I will use population. Now you see the pattern. If the field name and the variable name that you want into the function, they are the same, you don't need to specify them both. You can just say just the variable name here. The Ballerina knows what to do. Then I don't need country info. I can simply use dates here. Now this statement will destructure the record into different variables, right? So in that case, I don't need cd payload. Okay. So now I have calculated the case fill ratio. That's all good. Now, if I go back to the sequence diagram, I still need to communicate with one other endpoint, world bank. So this will give me the income level and the region of a country. Let me use another HTTP client here. Copy the URL. I'll copy the URL and the next statement in the interest of time, right? So it's same as the previous client, different URL and different name, and then I'm doing World Bank get again a string template. I'm going to pass the country code, right, that I received earlier. This will give me by XML payload by default. Now let me show you the XML payload. Let's do curl country, say okay. Okay. Now it has a country element, and then various other elements. But I'm only interested in this region element and the income level. So let's see how you can navigate this XML payload and extract the information out of them. So let's write a quick function. Let's say extract World Bank data. The input is World Bank payload. I need two things. I need the region and the income level. We can return this because this is a private function in my application. So I'm going to do a tuple here, string. This will return a tuple, right? First element, first element can be income level. Second element can be the region. I'm not going to write it now because of the time. Let me copy the content, copy the body of the function here. Right, let's see what I have done. So XML is also built into the language as a data type. So you can define XML namespace just like a regular statement, like a regular variable. So it's XML namespace, define WB, because this payload has a namespace here, right? And then here, I work when I go through the payload and get the income level element, similarly get the region level element. Then I return a tuple. So in this tuple, the first element is, I think this part, so the string part, the text element from here, I think data, and the same with region element. The function is ready. I can also do a little bit of this tuple destructuring here. Let's say income level, and region. Extract WB payload. I think now I have everything ready for the response. I had to return a country. So let's create a country record in line in the return statement. So when you're creating a record literal, you can use the same. When you're creating a record literal, it's the first element is code, and this is the field name, and this is the variable, is country code. Next one is name. So I have a name variable here. Then the next one is population. I have a population variable here. I think you get to see the pattern here as well. So if the field name and the variable name same, you don't need to repeat it. You can use just population. And the region, I have region, income level, and the case. Okay. So why I'm getting an error here? Okay, I have a country code, name, population, I have a region, income level, case failure ratio. So this is returning a country. I think I have all the fields. Yes, population, region, income level, and the case failure ratio. Let me check on this live demos. Oh, what's the problem with income level? Oh, I see. There is this typo here. Okay, it's all good. Sorry about that. Okay, now I think this function is ready. Okay, so how do I invoke this? Let's try it locally first before deploying this into deploying this as an Amazon Lambda. I'm going to write a public main function. Let's say use an IO library to print the output. Get code CFR. I need a country code here. So let's get a country code as a command line argument. Okay, so this code is ready. Let's give it a try. So you can do use bal run to compile, build, execute, or run it as a single step, or you could do bal build. This will generate executable file, and we can use that to run the program. So I'm using Swan Lake. Swan Lake is and the backend is Ballerina. Which, what do I mean by Ballerina? Is when you compile a Ballerina program, it produces JVM bytecode, and then at the end of the day, it will create a self-contained jar file, right? So you can run this in this. I have Java 11. You can run Java minus jar target bin CFR, and if I just hit it, I think it should fail because the missing. Okay. So I need to specify the country code, and let's format the output. All right, so I think it worked. Everything went well. So we got a payload here, JSON payload, country information. So we have Sri Lanka population, region, income level, and the case fatality ratio. If I use another country here, say Great Britain, GBR, I think I should get different results here. Yeah, region, income level, and case failed ratio. So I think you get the idea, right? So we can try with India. You get different results. So the case failure ratios are different between countries. Okay, now this function is working. So we tested it locally. Now we can deploy this into as an Amazon Lambda. So how do you do that? So in Ballerina, we support deploying functions, Ballerina functions, or Ballerina code, I would say, as an Amazon Lambda function or Asia function. So way to do that is by generating artifacts or the descriptors required, right? So you can do this by annotating the function as an AWS Lambda function. I would the AWS Lambda. I think this imports AWS Lambda module, and it has something called function, right? So this annotation marks this function as an AWS Lambda function. So I think I'm getting an error because the signature doesn't match with the expected signature. It says invalid function signature for a Lambda function. I think it needs another parameter here. So remember AWS Lambda context. Good. Let me make this a JSON now, and also input to a JSON code. So here the input output is JSON, and that should be okay. So from this JSON, let's quickly extract the code from the country code.code. So JSON, here's an object, right? So in the JSON spec, this JSON can be integer, a number, or a string, Boolean, nil, or a JSON object, or JSON array. This JSON can be many things. So in Ballerina, JSON is a union type of strings, ints, Booleans, JSON objects, and JSON array. So here the input is a JSON object. So if I type it here, the format should be something like this. JSON objects. It has a field called code, and the value, let's say, LK. Right? So this is the payload of this function, the parameter payload that I'm sending here to this function, and I'm extracting the value of code here. Right? So that's the expectation, and I'm returning a JSON. So as you have noticed here, earlier I was using a record, but I'm now returning a JSON. No errors, right? So JSON and record, there's a nice synergy between them. You can read more about this in our website. There are tons of content out there, like how how easy to work with JSON in the language, and how easy to data bind the JSON into a record using Ballerina, right? So I'm gonna change this code here. I think everything is ready to deploy this function. So I can probably get rid of this main. Now I don't need that anymore. Okay, so no errors, all good. Okay, so unused module, because in the main function I use IO module to print, but I'm not using that anymore. And it's an error to have unused modules in Ballerina, just like Go. Right, so I'm going to delete this. So I'll be using bal build. Let's see what happens. So I changed the previous example and I added a AWS Lambda function. I changed the signature a little bit. That's all I did. Now, after that, when I build, it created me artifacts required to deploy my program, my code into AWS Lambda, right? So it's automatically generated everything I need. I don't have to write a single thing here, right? And also it gave me a command to deploy that as well. So I have already installed and configured the AWS command line tool. So I'm going to be using that here. Let's see list functions. What are the functions that are there? I think should be fine. Okay. Okay, I have two functions, echo and coid CFR already. So let me delete that function. Function, I think it's function name. Okay, should be deleted now. Now it has only one function in my space, so it's echo. So all good. So let's copy this command and change the placeholders. Okay, the first one is, I think we need to specify the region here. Somewhere here. So region is US West 1. You can see the region here from in the previous function, right? And then the next one is the role ARN. I think I can get that here. This is the ARN of the role that I'm using. I have already configured my AWS account with this role and the user and everything. So I'm not going to show that today. The function name is get COVID CFR. Let me double check. Yeah, get CFR. And again, I had to change the function here. Let me quickly do that. CFR. Okay. It should deploy my function as an AWS Lambda function. Okay, let's give it a few seconds, see what happens, and then we can list functions and see whether they're there. We can quickly invoke it and see what happens. So as you can see, Ballerina build command automatically generated everything I need to deploy my function, right? So I think this is good. We can try AWS Lambda list functions. I have echo and I have coid CFR, so all good. I think now we can invoke this function. Let me get the command. First, we need to get the output, input. So as I said earlier, let's store this payload in the input JSON file. So I have input JSON here. This is the payload that I'm going to send to the function. And this is the command to invoke a function. AWS Lambda function, invoke function name, and the payload is input JSON. let's ask it to store the output in output JSON, right? So pretty soon, yeah, let's look at the output JSON. Okay, so okay, all good. So AWS Lambda functions, so Azure functions, they react to events, right? Certain events, like in AWS, could be you update an object in S3 bucket, you add an entry to a database, you send an email, things like that. So here, this function, the one that I created here, is reacted to a request that I'm sending. It'll spin up. I don't know how it works in AWS Lambda. It'll spin up the function, invoke it, and send me the result, right? So that's what happened here. So far, I think I covered, let's see, I develop a function and deploy this as an Lambda function. Let's quickly convert this REST API and go ahead. I think almost time now. I'll quickly develop the REST API and deploy this Docker and Kubernetes. Okay. So what I can do here, so in Ballerina, when you are developing a service, you can use the service construct in the language, right? And then you can use these protocols that are available with the standard library. You can see GraphQL, gRPC, HTTP. So today I'm going to use HTTP listener because I want to develop a RESTful API, so JSON over HTTP. So the base part, let's use CFR here, right? The services can have resource functions or remote functions. So certain protocols like HTTP and GraphQL, they're sort of data-oriented, where you work with resources, right? It could be get countries, post country. So it's always these verb and the noun combination. So you in this model, you have list of resources, and then you can define actions for those resources you can do. In HTTP, it's get, put, post, delete, those actions and resources. In gRPC, actions could be query and mutate, and then there are a bunch of resources, right? So these resource functions works nicely for these resource or data-oriented protocols. There are protocols like gRPC, RPC style protocols, where you don't have this resource concept. All you have is methods. Like for those use cases, you have a remote function, like let's say get void CFR, right? But for HTTP, it's more natural to have resource functions. So as you can see in Ballerina, a service can have resource functions and remote functions. Here in the HTTP case, it could be get and countries, right? And we can write another resource. So this will give me all the countries, right? If you want a single country, you could do path param with the country code. So sorry, this is a query param. Or you could do a path param. So this is syntax to have define a path param string code. So let's take a moment, see what we have here. So we have two resources here, get countries. It will give me all countries, and get country by code. Okay. In HTTP, remote functions are not allowed. So, but if you're using gRPC, you can use remote functions. Let me delete that. And I think we can update this to return country. And this should return country array. Okay. And most probably we'll have to return an error. because if something fails, an error, and this also. Okay, I think I can quickly copy this code here, and it should work automatically. So I don't need to define the code here. The code is already comes as a path param, and here also I can do this change. It's all good. And then I can probably get rid of this AWS Lambda function. Everything else is needed. I'm going to remove the module. Okay. Here, I'm not going to implement this today. I can copy the code. But for now, let's return an empty array. All good. Now, let's take a moment. So here you have, I just developed a service with 2 resources, right? And the resource signatures are pretty obvious. And as you can see, this function, even though I have a record type here, it returns a JSON. This record is automatically converted to a JSON before writing the payload into the wire. Now, one other thing that I can do using this code is, I'm not sure you're familiar with OpenAPI. OpenAPI descriptor is a way to describe a service. And using that, you can generate service stubs, client stubs, right, as well. So if you want to generate OpenAPI description, let's see, I think the command is OpenAPI. Let's look at the command. Yes, and if like example, you can export a service definition as a OpenAPI description. So let's try that. Bal OpenAPI -i is the main Bal file. The service name is CFR. Okay, they should generate a nice long YAML file. And I'm pretty sure you all are familiar with YAML, especially this audience. All right, so this is the OpenAPI descriptor. If you look at the paths, you have countries, and 2 resources are mapped to paths. And then these countries, it returns, it gives you an array of country, right? And then the country code gives you a single element of country. The country is defined here, right? The fields and the types and required fields. As you can see, so this can be directly mapped into an OpenAPI descriptor. So what does that mean? So this is, you can represent you can have a typed service using Ballerina. So this is fully typed. It has 2 resource functions. You have the get action, get verb, at the resource name, and you can specify the path param, query params, and the input and output payloads types, etc. Just using the language. Right? Nothing else, no annotations required. And so this is a beauty of Ballerina here. And then you can generate OpenAPI description, or possibly you can generate a descriptor required you to deploy this into Kubernetes and things like that. We'll see about that. All right. So the next step is to fill this function body. I think I have already here. I'm not gonna type that. Let me replace this. Okay. I'll quickly go through this function. So as you can see, I have added additional query params here. So you can just control the behavior of this function. You can specify the number of countries you want. minimum population, minimum deaths and cases. And then same as before, you get the COVID data. This time you get all countries. Then you do some filtering using the query expressions in Ballerina. So this syntax is pretty similar to C#. Link. You can declaratively process data using query expressions. So here, I basically loop through each country in COVID countries array. And then for each country, I do destructuring. So I get different variables here. Then I filter out the countries based on the query parameters. So if the minimum population is defined, I use that value. If not, the default value is, I think, 100,000. This is the LVS operator because the min population is an optional query parameter, so that their value can be nil as well. So if it's nil, then use the default value, same as this. So I do a little bit of filtering based on the query parameter. Then I define a new variable using the let clause. This is a case fatality ratio. Then I order all the countries based on the case, the CFR, in a descending order. Then I limit the countries to number of countries, if not 10. Then I create a new record and store. So this filtered countries is another intermediate array with this type of records, I would say. Then I loop through those filtered countries and talk to the World Bank API and enrich those records with income and the region and populate a country array and return it. So it's straightforward. I think we can first run this locally. I'll use run. So in another tab, I'll prepare a curl 1990 CFR countries. Should work, I think. So I should get a list of 10 countries here with the highest case fatality ratio. So Yemen being on top as the first highest CFR, and then Sudan, Peru, Mexico, like that. So if you want, let's say, number of countries, like 4, use double quotes here. I'm almost done with this. You should get like 4 countries, right? So that's, let me stop the service. Okay, the service is working fine. So this is the high level interface. Now, one other thing about the language is I'm going to explain the difference between syntax and arrow. So when you write code, especially these network interactions and perhaps the concurrency constructs in Ballerina, you can visualize your code as a sequence diagram. This is one of the unique aspects of the language. It's sometimes when you come back to your code, like after 6 months, it'll, or as if you're maintaining this code, usually we do diagrams and we write code comments so that some other people can read, right? So usually code is written once, not once, but written once and read many times. So that's usual. If you are especially writing code in a company, and then the company needs to maintain the code for a long time, so documentation important. So Ballerina by default can visualize your code as a sequence diagram. So let's see what that looks like. So let me think you can see my screen again. So this is the service that I have created, HTTP, and it has 2 resources, countries. So I'll open this one. So as you can see here, so this is the sequence diagram of the country by code. So first we get the code data, and then do some processing, and then we communicate with World Bank API, and then finally we send the payload, right? So this sequence diagram is pretty similar to the one we saw earlier, right? That's a mental model. So this sequence diagram shows the network interactions. And I think the other one also is pretty similar. It's a little bit more complicated because of the loop. So let me, yeah. So first get COVID data, processing, we go a loop, and then communicate, they interact with the World Bank API in a loop, and create countries array and return, right? So that's that. Okay. Then last stages. Let's open the terminal. All right. I think the service is not running. We can create, it's not required, but sometimes if you want to push, let's say when you are developing a Docker, you want to push a your Docker image to the Docker Hub, you may need this. So I'm gonna service is CFR and the version 10. Right. So I just created a cloud.toml with these fields, and I'm gonna generate the Docker file and the Docker image. So I just need to do bal build -- cloud equals Docker. Hopefully, I think this should work. And once it's done, it should create a Docker image and push it to the my local repo. I can optionally push it to the Docker Hub, my Docker Hub account as well. Let me do Docker images. Okay, so as you can see, we have the CFR is created a few seconds ago. So it's created Docker image, and you can also check the Docker file here, right? It's all good. So I think I can run it. Okay, so let me try to see. Okay, so it's running 10 seconds ago, all good. And the port, yeah, port is also there. I can do curl localhost port 90, sorry about that, port 9090, CFR and countries, let's say, okay, get something out. This is running in the dock. Okay, so that's good. Let me up container. So what I showed earlier is that without even writing a single, just from the service, you can generate descriptors required to deploy your application in Docker. Similarly, I think this is all because of these abstractions in the language, like this network abstraction, like services, listeners, resources. These extensions like Docker, Kubernetes, or AWS Lambda, they all can look at the code and knows exactly what you are doing. That's why they can generate necessary descriptors, right? So that's good. The next one I'm going to do is do a bal build. Okay, that's the last step. Okay, it is. this will generate artifacts or descriptors, a service and deployment, probably the autoscaler YAML files. Okay. All right. I think this generation was successful. Let's go ahead and inside the target and see what we have. So it's a YAML file. This is service, Kubernetes service. This is Kubernetes deployment, and the autoscaler, right? So it generates everything. So you might be thinking like this may not be enough for certain cases. If you want to push this to production, you need a little bit. You need to take this a little bit more. But as a developer, if you are a developer who wants to write something and deploy that to Kubernetes and test it out, this is a good start, right? So, and also our target, we want to develop this because we want developers with, let's say there are people who are not that familiar with Kubernetes concepts, and we wanted to abstract them away from Kubernetes, but still they can deploy stuff to Kubernetes, right? You just, as a developer, if you write services, if you write code in Ballerina, using right abstractions provided the language, it's pretty easy to generate descriptors, right? Now I could, at the last step, I can use these commands to deploy my application into Kubernetes. So it will create the service deployment. Could do. So the other thing is, let me use an alias here for the command. I don't want to pronounce this command in a wrong way. I'd rather be using K. So get SVC. Okay, CFR SVC. All right, so that I'm not gonna run it here, my machine today. So that's mostly what I wanted to cover. Anything else? I took a little bit of extra time, but I'm glad I could cover everything that I was planning to do. So just to as a summary, so I developed a Ballerina function, and we deployed that into AWS Lambda, and then we converted that function as a service, and then we deployed that to Kubernetes and Docker, and everything went well. So I'm using the Apple M1, and I think when I tried to run this service in Kubernetes, there was a problem. So that's why I'm not going to show that. I'll try to fix that sometime later, and probably do a blog post around that, how to get that. I'm using Rancher desktop here. Yeah. So that's it. Over to you, Chirag. Let me stop my screen.
Thank you, Sameera. And now it's our time to ask some questions to give Zach.
Sorry, I can't hear you, Chirag. Sorry.
Yeah. Hello. Can you hear me? Hello. Hello.
I think next step would be to show questions, right?
Yeah.
Let me share my screen again. So the Kubernetes meetup organizers asked me to prepare a list of questions for a giveaway. I think I was asked to create 3, but I created 2. I couldn't figure out the third one. So the questions are, um, uh, why do we need both open and closed records? I think I covered this in the demo. A brief answer would be great. Then the second one is describe the semantics of the check-in expressions, the check keyword basically. What happens? Right. So those are the 2 questions. Right. I'll give the control back to Chirag.
Yeah.
All right,
You
Chirag.
can, yeah. You can comment the answers in the comment section. Let's see. Sameera, shall we repeat the questions again? I think, yeah, there's one answer in the comment.
Looks like we are getting some answers. So I think I can see a question. What are the advantages when we use Ballerina with comparing Java in the cloud development? We can provide a detailed answer for sure, but for the now, I'll provide a detailed answer later. So for now, I can say um, Ballerina, like Java is it's a perfect language. For example, if you are developing uh, complete microservices with like a lot of code in it, as in you do a lot of processing, calculation, mathematical calculation, something like that, then I'm saying you should use Java. But let's say your use case is more towards like writing a service. In that service, you talk to a database, some other backend systems, and you do a lot of these network interactions. Ballerina gives you a nice network abstractions like services, clients, and these protocols, these JSON to like JSON to record binding, working with data. So everything is pretty unique in the language. So you can write that code in a concise manner, and then so and all these things are typed. So I would say give it a try and see how it feels. Basically, for those kind of use cases, our opinion is Ballerina is better, but it's up to you to figure that out by yourself. So if you have a requirement a use case that similar to what I did today, uh, write your code in Ballerina and see both the Ballerina and Java and see how it feels. Okay, let me repeat the question. Um, the questions are why do we need both open and closed records? Um, and the second question is describe the semantics of check-in expressions. The simple, you can provide simple answers. I think I explained both in my demo at early stages. All right, let me stop sharing. I think Charity is back.
Yeah.
I just would like tell you that a lot of content documentation in Ballerina.io. Um, please do try out Ballerina um, and give us feedback. Uh, why do you like about Ballerina? And if you don't like about Ballerina, please also maybe you can comment on the YouTube live or join our Slack channel. Pretty soon we'll have a Discord as well. So use those channels and uh, tell us your experience with Ballerina.
Can you hear me now? Hello, Sameera?
Okay, I'll look at the comment section, Chirat, and figure out winner. Give me a couple of seconds.
Yeah.
Let me go through the. Okay. So based on the comments, closest. Okay, let me. We're still getting some comments. So now let's go with Lakshan Madhuranga. He has provided the closest answer. So congratulations, Lakshan.
Okay. Today's winner is Lakshan Madhuranga from Facebook comment section. And I think it is time to wrap up today's session. It was a great journey from code to cloud with Reena. And thank you, Sameera, for dedicating your time to lead us in the journey. And thank you all for attending today's session. Let's meet next time. Stay safe.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.